Welcome, I'm Jon Caldara, president of the Independence Institute and your devil's advocate. A little later, we're going to take a look at last week's elections locally, but first, there's this inverse relationship. The most important things in government that affect your life are the god-awful, most worst, boring things to talk about. It's kind of like your household budget. It's like the long bill in the budget and something called the School Finance Act. Please, don't turn us off just yet, because this really is important. Representative Paul Lundeen, Republican down in El Paso, thank you for being with us.
Glad to be here with you, John, and it's important, so please stay tuned in.
Yeah. Half of them are gone anyway right now. That did it. Alec Garnett, thank you for being here. Now, congratulations on being old enough to buy 3-2 beer. I'm really thrilled about that. And your district, again, I always forget.
It's Central Denver. It's
Okay.
the youngest district based on average age of voter in the state. So they're excited. They're excited.
So not only do
excited.
I hate you, I hate your constituents for being young.
Yeah, the Independence Institute is in House District 2.
Oh.
And so I'm the representative of the Independence Institute.
Well, good, because we got problems on our sidewalk I want to talk to you about.
I have a cell phone for your city council person.
See, the older we get, the more we hate young people, and that's the way it should be. All right, let me ask both of you. You guys sponsored a bill together. This is one of those oddball left-right coalitions that actually have the potential of getting something done to take a look at restructuring the School Finance Act. Now, nobody knows what this is. Nobody knows what it means, but it is one of the most critical mechanisms in state government that directs how all of our kids get educated. It drives our state budget, which means how much goes to roads and everything else. What is the state or the School Finance Act? Before we get into the problems, what exactly is it that we're talking about?
It's the funding formula that determines how we divvy up the roughly $7 billion we spent last year or will spend this year on public education. So it's fundamental. It goes to how we educate the nearly 900,000 students here in Colorado. And it's an artifact. It's an artifact of a different time. It was last.
So are you, my friend. So are you.
I am. I'm getting a little long in the tooth, no doubt about it. It was last rewritten back in 1994, back when you were almost young.
No, I wasn't even back then. All right, so it's been a good 30 years. Oh my God, has it really? Mm-hmm. Since we looked at this, but it's how the money goes to 178 different school districts. Why this is a big deal is that we have all sorts of different school districts. We have rich school districts, Cherry Creek and Boulder, and they can tax their folks a lot. I live in Boulder, so I know I'm taxed a lot. And we have rural districts that have fewer kids, but they still have costs. And so there have been court rulings that say more money needs to go here to equalize. You can't raise more taxes here because then it gets unequal. What's the problem with this old formula?
Well, the world's changed a lot since 1994, and what we know about education has as well. And so when we look at per pupil funding, how much we're giving each district for each student that they serve, I think we've learned a lot over time, and it's about, now it's time to go in, take what we've learned, and see if making a few tweaks to the formula to better enable the education of all of our kids to meet their needs, if now is the time, and I think it is.
Right now, how much does every kid get on an operating per pupil? It's a little less than $7,000, right?
Right. It's about $6,800.
And part of the challenge is it varies among the 178 districts that you just mentioned between about $7,000 and about $18,000. So it varies widely among the districts based on the way the formula functions.
And that's for operations. So the state says, here's how much we're going to give you each district. So here's $7,000 for every kid you have. That doesn't include stuff like your building and other capital expenses, does it? This is for the operation to hire your teachers and the administrators and things like that.
Yes and no. Now, in the situation of charter schools, which serve about 12% of the students in Colorado, about 113,000 students, those charter schools, they pay for their buildings out of their operating budget. But the government schools, the neighborhood schools, they get the opportunity to go to taxpayers and say, hey, we need a bond issue to build a new building. So the answer is, in the traditional school, the government school, that's not true. In charter schools, they do pay for their buildings out of their operating budget.
Give me the number one problem with what we've got going on right now. So, I mean, we're working with a system, and schools get between 7 and 16 grand a kid.
18.
18. What's the problem?
I think the problem is that on top of that $7,000 you get, a district will get money if there's an English language learner, or there's a child with an intellectual disability, or there's a child which the state has determined is at risk, which is just whether or not you qualify for free and reduced lunch. Those factors are pretty square. They have been, over time, I think we've learned that we can better identify what a service a kid needs, and the formula doesn't reflect what we've learned since 1994.
Even these terminologies, because we live and breathe this stuff because we have no lives.
Right.
But when people hear free and reduced lunch, they go, really, that's the handshake secret code for this is a lower income student, and if you qualify for free or reduced lunch, it means you're poor, and then you're going to get extra benefits like free lunches, but we might be able to help you out with other things as well. English language means we've got kids who don't know how to speak English, and so we need to bring them up to speed on this. So there's all this different stuff. Why is this a budgetary problem? I mean, isn't it? Talk to me about the backfill part. This is the stuff that I still have a hard time getting. I've always thought, well, we have school districts, we have local control, the localities tax their local people, they do their thing, and why should this even be a state function? Shouldn't this be a local school district function?
And historically it was. Back in the day, not too many decades ago, 60% of the money came from local funds, and 40% was backfilled or brought in by the state. Now those roles have been reversed. Nearly 60% of the money now comes from the state, and 40%.
Why? Because we keep
of
talking
this
about local
formula.
control.
The
arcane
formula that would seriously glaze all of your viewers' eyes over is the reason why.
They watch PPS. They are used to getting glazed over.
Well, but there's even bigger challenges. The time has moved on. What we have is a rotary phone dial system in an age where we all have smartphones. The reality is we need to catch up.
I get the analogy, but prove the analogy. What is so wrong with the way we do it?
What is so wrong with the way we do it?
Right. I mean, my kid goes to school. She gets fed the usual Boulder propaganda about how we're destroying the planet, and she comes home and tells me about it.
Here's my perspective, and I won't speak for Representative Garnett, but my perspective is what we're doing wrong is your daughter has the opportunity to build an education that is customized for her needs and for the future she wants to build. We've got in our society and almost all the other aspects of our society the ability to mass customize what we want our lives to look like. In education, we're still doing it the way we did back when we were harvesting crops behind a team of horses. The reality is we need to drag this formula into the 21st century to honor those students and their potential. That's what's being left on the table right now.
All right, so you guys passed legislation to bring together a committee to try to come up with solutions for this. And you have 2 years to come up with a fix.
Yeah, I mean, I'm going one meeting at a time. It's a bipartisan group of 5 Democrats and 5.
I like that. It's like,
5
we're going to win this one first down at a time.
It is a really complex issue. It can be politically very polarizing. And so in order for us to get to a place where we can come together and agree on changes to this formula, we're going to have to work together. We're going to have to be very bipartisan.
Do you see a point where we go back to the before days where localities paid 60% of the cost and the state filled in the minority part?
So I don't know if we go back to those days, but I do think that the biggest issue that we're going to have to solve is the discrepancy in local share to state share across the 178 school districts. So we have huge discrepancies in what Boulder and Denver can put towards K through 12 through their local mill levies compared to a lot of districts in other parts of the state. And we've seen huge discrepancies in that. And so what we have to do is we're going to have to come together and we're going to take a few field trips.
Is that a problem? I mean, the idea of if Cherry Creek can tax their people more, they want to pay more. Should the state then say, I'm sorry, you can't spend more because the guys in La Junta County can't do it?
No, but I think when it comes to, I think there is a question of there's always been, we saw it in Amendment 66 in 2013. There is this fear that if we raise additional resources and revenue to go towards education, that it's going to go somewhere else, that it's going to go to Denver and then going to be distributed to other areas. And so I think we have to.
As a guy who was very active in leading the campaign against 66,
right.
let me say part of the fear is, not fear at all, but frustration,
right.
that we spend a lot of money on education. And we see the growth of administration. We don't see the growth of satisfaction. We don't see the growth of grades. We don't see the money going there. We see states like Utah with a fraction of what we spend doing a better job. And there's a frustration that it's not just about money. That
I agree.
we want, and I listen, you'll understand when you get our age, okay? When you get our age, you see it. When you go to the educrats and what is it you want? There is a one-word message: more. So how much is going to be? More. There's never been a time where the CEA didn't cry for more. And I'm worried about this process that you guys started. Is this going to be something that just turns into another plea for more? Because I don't want to run another anti-tax campaign.
My perspective is that's always a part of the conversation. You're right. There are certain constituencies that they have a one-word answer to the solution. But my perspective is we have an opportunity in this effort to begin to define what does the money flow look like and use the student as the denominator instead of a district or a school or a state. Let's look instead of at a system, which is what we do right now. We honor a system in just about everything we do with our financing of education. Instead of honoring the system, let's honor the student. Let's start looking at this as if the common denominator is the student, and that student is unique and individual, and we can serve that student by breaking down the way the funding flows more accurately.
Couldn't you say that the money does go to the student now because that pile of money goes to the districts based on their enrollment, right?
I mean, I think one of the things other states have looked at, and one that I think as we move forward into the 21st century that we're going to have to do better at, is tracing the dollar. So if you are getting categorical funding for an English language learner, you're just going to the district. The district doesn't necessarily have to hire someone or make sure that that student is getting the service that they need to be successful.
All right, maybe I'm starting to understand something here.
So you're getting it. He's getting
slowly.
it. So
My God,
the answer doesn't go to the student. The answer is today, no. It goes to a system.
Right. So in other words, I have a son with special needs. He has Down syndrome. So the school district goes, well, that's fine, but he's still in this mix. We got $7,000 per kid. We're going to have to take out this amount. Instead, a new system might go, well, we've got your kid who has Down syndrome. He's obviously going to need this much. Or the second English as a second language. Well, that kid's going to get that much. And if that kid switched from here to there, that amount follows him, instead of it just falling through a system. Am I getting a little closer?
You are much closer. Potentially is the answer, direct answer to your question. Potentially it could go that way. I would argue that it should go that way, that that's the best way to do it, because then we can begin to get at this customization of learning opportunities for children. That's really, this is the forward-looking piece of this conversation. How do we do this differently than before? And the answer is to meet the student where they're at.
We're late, we got a break, but let me ask one last question. I'm always worried about the process, because it's been my experience that the special interests run the process. So you're chairing this I'm going to call it a process. You got this committee. Yep. Because the special interests, they have an interest in doing it. The diffused interest, the taxpayer, we don't have time to go to your damn committee meetings.
You're always welcome, though.
Yeah, we're always welcome, but we
joking.
have no incentive to do it because we're spread out. How do I know that taxpayers and that everyone is heard in this, including those voices that are not getting money because of it?
It's a really good question. It's something that Representative Lundeen and I worked on very hard as we were drafting the bill. There have been 2 past interim committees that have done this. They actually put members of these education groups on the committee with them. We decided to make it just a legislator-driven committee. We're going to have a big stakeholder process. We're going to have a public comment period. We're going to do everything we can to open this up, and we're also going to travel to rural parts of Colorado, because there is a question of, do we need 178 school districts? And before I cross into that discussion, it's important that I go on the ground and meet with people in these smaller districts and get a better sense of the culture. And so we're going to go out, we're going to learn as much as we can.
And by the way, I don't trust any of this left-right kumbaya crap, so I don't know what you guys are trying to pull on us. But hey, thank you both so much. Best of luck. Keep us informed. Stay tuned.